After breaking the huddle and identifying themselves as offensive linemen with the hand up in the call, line, 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 players may not shift or motion to a new position. Once identified as a lineman for that play, they must see through the conclusion of the play as a lineman. In 7-man rookie tackle football, our 3-man offensive line is ineligible to be the first receiver on a passing play. They cannot go out for a pass, they must stay behind the line of scrimmage and are not eligible. If a ball is tipped and floating around in the backfield, they are eligible to catch it and move it upfield then, but only after it has been touched by another player. This is why the rule states that our 3 offensive linemen are ineligible to be the first receiver of any pass ball. In addition to our 3 offensive linemen, in 7-player rookie tackle football, 4 players are required on the line of scrimmage for each and every play. That means that the 4th player outside of the lineman can either be what we'll call a traditional tight end position or a wide receiver. How you align them and where you align them is up to you, as long as you have 4 players on the line of scrimmage for each and every play. With 4 players aligned on the line of scrimmage, and we'll say a quarterback, that now gives us 2 players that we can line up at the coach's choosing. We could easily have 2 players in the backfield in a traditional I formation if we wanted to run some sort of traditional run play. We could also use split backs, some sort of wing back player, or we could place him in the slot. He can very easily be aligned on this side of the field as long as he is off the line of scrimmage. But remember, coaches and officials, our no trips rule is still in effect. We'll still box off outside the guard-to-guard box, and only players inside the cylinder will be considered free of the trips rule. Finally, let's talk about defensive adjustments for 7-player rookie tackle football. Within 7-player rookie tackle football, the offense must have 3 linemen. That means our defense is going to have 2 down linemen considered defensive tackles. Now, when we say down linemen, we mean down on the line of scrimmage, not down in a stance. Remember, all players in rookie tackle must be in a 2-point stance. Our other rules still apply. These 2 defensive tackles must be in a head-up or outside shade. They have to be shaded, meaning one of their feet is inside the feet of the offensive player, and they can't be in any way shaded towards the inside, in the A-gap, or lined up over the center. We do have a rule that states that defensive players can match a line of scrimmage player. That means if we were to line up a tight end here in our 7-player offense, the offense would now have a heavy run surface, which would be unfair to the defense. To counteract that point, the defense is allowed to move a 3rd player on the line of scrimmage. He must follow the same rules. He must be aligned head up or outside shade, but now allows us to match the heavy run surface of a tight end. If we were to take our tight end and move him out as a single receiver now, defensive coordinators and officials must be aware of the same rule. They have the ability to match a line of scrimmage player, meaning they could put a press cornerback on that receiver. If they don't want to match the extra player on the line of scrimmage, they don't have to. But if they don't match line of scrimmage, he must move to 4 yards depth. We do not allow in-between lineups such as 2 or 3 yards trying to play tricks with the quarterback or the offense. We're either on the line of scrimmage or held to our 4-yard standard. In alignment with our rookie tackle core rules, which go across all 3 versions of the game, 7-player rookie tackle football is mandated to have at least 1 defensive player 10 yards from the line of scrimmage. Most traditionally, this is our middle of the field safety who's at 10 yards of depth. If we have our 2 defensive tackles, if we match our line of scrimmage player, and we have our safety at 10 yards depth, that means the defensive coordinator now has 3 players in which he can align wherever he chooses or to use to match the offense. Most commonly, we'll see a middle linebacker aligned up over the center. He is allowed to be over the center because he's meeting the 4-yard minimum requirement. We could also place 1 linebacker or rover over here and 1 linebacker or rover over here so that we have a nice balanced front. If the offense were to present us with some unique or new formation, we may choose to move where we place our players. Say, for instance, we had a situation where the offense came out and had all of their players in the cylinder. The Rovers give us a nice balanced look, or a defensive coordinator can use the Rovers to match offensive personnel. If the offense were going into a one running back set with a slot receiver, say we had a quarterback in shotgun, we had a running back following his cylinder rule lined up behind the guard, and we placed a receiver out here, we could bump this rover over. And if we wanted to, we could even slide our linebackers over to be stacked behind our defensive tackles. Now, one of the most common issues in youth football is the ability to hold contain. So most often, we'll see this rover stay outside in order to be a contained player and keep our linebacker working in the middle. Regardless of where you deploy them, we have our line of scrimmage players, we have our 4-yard wall, and we have our 10-yard wall. This goes to the levels and spacing concept we talked about early, making sure the offense has space to play and the defense has space to actively pursue and chase down ball carriers. Final point on defensive alignment in the 4-yard rule. The defense must have 2 defensive linemen matching the 2 guards, but is not required to match the 4th line of scrimmage player. If we had a player lined up as a tight end position, we could take this gentleman who used to be our, we'll call him a defensive end, and move him off the line. As long as he is at 4 yards depth, that is a legal defensive formation. But this player who is now off the line must abide by our core rules. That means he is ineligible to blitz and may not rush the passer. As soon as he leaves the line of scrimmage, he cannot shoot a gap or attack downhill. He can only naturally flow to the ball carrier. While this is a discretionary call by the officials, we encourage officials, commissioners, and coaches to work together to understand the goals and values of the rules and help make sure that it happens on game day. Off the line of scrimmage players may not blitz, and coaches should not look for sneaky ways to make a blitz happen. If you see it once, officials, talk to the coach. If you see it again, it's probably a good time to throw your flag and nip it in the bud early. If you see it once, talk to the coach and make sure it was an honest mistake by the player. If you see it a second time, you may need to throw the flag and nip it in the bud early. Now let's talk about the offensive and defensive adjustments for 8-player rookie tackle football. 8-player rookie tackle football mandates 3 offensive linemen on each and every offensive play. These players must be a center and 2 guards. These 2 guards must be on opposite sides of the center. We do not allow unbalanced formations in which we have both offensive linemen on one side of the center, creating an overloaded run surface. Once we've established our 3-player offensive line, a center and 2 guards, we must now recognize that the 8-man rulebook states we must have 5 players on the line of scrimmage at each and every play. These players may be moved closer to or farther away from the guards based on your playbook, but also allows the offensive coordinator some flexibility. If we were to line up, we'll call them 2 tight ends, we would have our 3-player line plus 2 extra players, creating a 5-man heavy run surface. This is a traditional formation we would call tight, as it implies a 2 tight end offense. A coach may keep 1 tight end and move one of these players out to receiver. As long as this receiver is on the line of scrimmage, this is a completely legal formation with 5 players on the line. 1 tight end, 1 receiver. We would typically call this a pro formation just for ease of communication. If we wanted to run some sort of spread offense with our youngsters, we could have 2 wide receivers and our 3-player line. Again, 5 players on the line of scrimmage. Our 1-yard, 3-foot rule is in place between these 2 players, and we are in a completely legal 8-man, 5-player LOS formation. Outside of our 5 players on the line of scrimmage, the coach is free to deploy his 3 remaining offensive players however he so chooses, as long as it does not violate the trips rule. Traditionally, we'll have a quarterback, and then we'll have 2 other players. These 2 players could be both in the backfield in either an I formation or a split back formation, depending on the offense you want to run. You could also quite easily have 1 running back and place a slot receiver to either side. If I have a slot over here or a slot over here. Again, I'm meeting all my standards for a completely legal formation. Players in the cylinder, I have twins out here, legal formation. 5 players on the line of scrimmage, legal formation. In the 8-player version of the game, it's also very easy to go empty. Most often, our empty personnel is going to be accompanied by a shotgun snap, but this is a legal formation as well. Motion is allowed as long as it doesn't create trips. So this player could motion into the backfield before the play is snapped and run a jet sweep or other such play. As long as the motion player does not cross our guard-to-guard box, that cylinder we talk about, motion will be legal. When talking about our guard-to-guard box and how it affects trips formation, refer back to the core rules section. Remember, if I were to line up a wing back here, I now have 2 players on this side of the field. If I wanted to go shotgun offset, my running back must make sure that his outside foot is inside the outside foot of the guard in order for him to be considered in the box and therefore not a trips formation. As soon as this foot creeps outside of this foot, he now becomes outside of the box and is now an illegal trips formation. If I wanted to place that running back on the opposite side of the formation, he would be free to line up outside of the box because I would have twins over here and 2 receivers over here, not violating the trips principle, 5 players on the line of scrimmage, completely legal formation. These rules allow for offensive coordinators flexibility, but also maintains the core values of rookie tackle football. Because one of the core tenets of rookie tackle football is position sampling and allowing all players to play all positions over the course of the season, we want to make sure that we understand there will be no numerical assignments specifically for offensive line players. Week to week, quarter to quarter, or even series to series, you may have new players lined up off in the offensive line. If you have a number 3, a number 50, and a number 19 on the offensive line, that's a completely legal formation because we know these players will be rotating multiple positions throughout the course of the year. Now, because different numbers will be lined up at different positions on different plays, we need to make sure that we let the defense know who's going to be our offensive line players. We do this by having the offensive line notification rule. As soon as the huddle is broken, the 3 offensive line players must raise their hand and say, line, line, line. They will keep their hand raised until they get to the line of scrimmage and begin to come into their stance. Once a player has identified himself as a line player, he may not shift or motion out of the line position until the conclusion of the play. Once identified, he is a line player throughout the play. All players assigned as offensive line players on that individual play, regardless of number, are ineligible for first touching of the ball. That means they cannot receive a pass. If a ball has been tipped by either an eligible receiver or a defensive lineman, that player can pluck it out of the air and advance it upfield. But in that case, he's clearly the second toucher of the football, not the first receiver, and is an eligible play. Make sure you communicate this with your coaches, officials, and coaches. Make sure you communicate this with your players. You'll have your chance to catch a pass. When on the offensive line, you can't be the first toucher of the football. This occurs most often on screen plays where kids get turned around and want to catch the ball. Make sure they understand this rule for a smooth, quick-flowing game. Finally, let's talk about defensive rule adjustments for 8-player rookie tackle football. Because our play starts with 3 dedicated offensive linemen, our defensive players will have 2 dedicated defensive linemen. Staying true to our core rules vision, these players must be head up or outside shade. They cannot penetrate the A-gap or make first contact with the center so that we can preserve the A-gap. Because the offense in 8-player has multiple formation adjustments, let's talk about matching line of scrimmage players in 8-player tackle football. If the offense were to line up in this sort of situation, our spread look for 8-player football, we could match the offensive players playing wide receiver with a pressed cornerback. Again, the choice to match a line of scrimmage players outside of the guard-to-guard box is up to the coach's discretion. But if we choose not to match, the 4-yard rule is in place, and this defensive player must be at least 4 yards back. If our offense were to bring in one of those wide receivers and make him a traditional tight end position, Our defense could match and would now go to a three-man defensive line. This player must abide by the same defensive line rules as the defensive tackles. He must be aligned head up or outside shade. He has to make sure at least one of his feet is inside the feet of this tight end. And this player, similar to the defensive tackles, must be in a two-point stance consistent with all rookie tackle rules. If our offense were to bring in both players to create our tight formation, now the defense would be looking at a four-man defensive line. The same rules would apply for all four players. Head up or outside alignment as long as they don't break the foot rule and must be in a two-point stance. We think this rule makes it simple for players to understand, matching line of scrimmage players, and allows defensive coordinators the flexibility to field a 2, 3, or 4-player defensive line to match heavy run threats. Our rookie tackle core rules stated that one defensive player must be at least 10 yards from the ball at every player. Traditionally, the safety lined up in the middle of the field, which would be over the ball because we don't play hashes, we'll have our one deep safety. With 4 defensive linemen in this alignment and one deep safety, the defensive coordinator now has 3 linebackers which he can move around either at his own free will or to adjust to offensive formations. Most typically, we'll see a middle linebacker lined up over the center. This backer is allowed to be over the center because he meets the 4-yard minimum criteria. We could stack 2 extra backers, who I'll call rovers because they're going to be our adjusters, behind the outside edge of our defensive ends or behind our defensive tackles, however you see fit. If the offense were to come out with some formation, say we were going to have a wing back over here, a quarterback under center, and a running back straight down the middle, we could choose to shift our defense over to this heavy run side. My rover may now choose to come outside here as long as he stays on his 4-yard minimum because this is not a line of scrimmage player. I could shift my linebacker over to stack behind these 2 guys, and I could move my rover in to stack these 2 guys. This sliding of our 3 second-level players allows you to match any formation the offense throws at you and still be in a sound fundamental defense without putting too much learning on your young players. We really like this rule, and it makes sure to give us our 3 very distinct levels that allow for an open, fast-paced version of the game. We really like this simple slide rule because it allows your second-level players to simply slide across the field, which shouldn't be a big deal who's lined up where because all players learn all skills in rookie tackle football. You can adjust to any formation while limiting the learning these young players need to do. Simply match the receiver and slide one direction or the other. The other thing about our 4-yard rule and our matching of the LOS rule is our defense now has 3 very distinct layers, teaching our players the core foundations of what most football will look like at the older age groups and allowing space and pace of play as these players are able to pursue the ball carrier and not become a beehive of honey around moshed up football that all happens in this tiny little space. As stated previously, defensive coordinators do not need to make their players match their line of scrimmage counterparts. That means if we were to get this formation, this player right here, our defensive end we'll call him, would not have to be lined up on the line of scrimmage. You could choose to line him up off the line of scrimmage. If he lined up off the line of scrimmage, he must abide by the 4-yard rule. And most importantly, you cannot replace him with another player, meaning we couldn't bring our rover down to the line of scrimmage to match the wingback. Any player on the line of scrimmage must be matched by a line of scrimmage offensive player and be in a head up or outside shade alignment. If we decided to keep him back here for whatever reason, maybe we were concerned about contain, so we moved our rover way out. We wanted to keep our middle linebacker here. Remember, an off-the-line player who could be on the line of scrimmage has made the choice voluntarily to not be on the line of scrimmage. That means he still cannot blitz or penetrate the gap. He'd only be allowed to penetrate the gap if he was on the line of scrimmage. As soon as he moves back to here, he cannot penetrate a gap because that would be considered an illegal blitz. Also, on a pass play, a player who is off the line of scrimmage cannot rush the passer. It would be illegal anyway because he is outside the guard box, but is a very challenging call in youth football, and you will see this on the line of scrimmage player sometimes rush. The first time, we always recommend talk to the player, inform him of his mistake, as long as his rush did not cause a turnover on downs. Let him know what he did wrong. If he repeats the mistake, you may need to talk to the coach or throw the flag. Coaches, officials, thank you for joining us on the Rookie Tackle Rules module of this course. We hope this resource can serve as an ongoing review and study during your season. Come back, watch these videos, refresh yourself on the rules, pass these rules along to your fellow coaches and to the parents so they become more familiar with rookie tackle football. As always, thank you for everything you do for the kids who play this great game, and thank you for coming on the rookie tackle football journey with us here at USA Football.